Hey guys, welcome back. I just want to go over some more old world pictures and some more of the destruction that we see everywhere. So as you can see, some of these structures are just so massive and complex and impressive. This one's actually in India. So like I've said before in my other videos, these structures are everywhere. This looks like it's in a dream actually. Look how beautiful with the gold up here. This one I believe is in Spain, but you see how it's coming off this hill here? There's actually more little structures up here. Yeah, I think all of this mountain right here, or mound, was probably more structure that was connected to this, and this bridge, you know, connected the two. This was probably it too. Yeah, there's probably caves in here and stuff. That's what we find whenever we start researching this. You start discovering those kind of features. Another one, and I just want to show these just to kind of get, you know, remind ourselves the features, the forms, because even to describe this, if I was to see this and none of y'all had ever seen any of these sculpture or these structures before, I mean, you have to develop like a whole new language to start explaining all the different features. They're so sophisticated and complex. Again, I think we're underestimating the grandeur of these structures. And like the details like this, you see this like screaming face. We see this a lot on this kind of Phoenician style Art Nouveau. And it makes me wonder, like, did they know? Did they know that some kind of cataclysm was about to take place? I mean, what a bizarre artistic addition to add to your building, like these very serious faces and this screaming man right in the center. And with a lot of these, you can zoom in on any part of these structures and find just, I mean, mouth-watering, beautiful detail. There's like gargoyles hanging off here, all these little details here, these little nodes. A lot of people theorize, and I agree that these little nodes were probably the electric, like the light bulbs, basically, that they lit up. Like, see this face here? It's like they knew something, like they were foreseeing some kind of just a shocking, terrifying event was coming. Yeah, all this is so, I mean, such sophistication. It's just finesse. The old world had finesse and class, and we just don't see that today. I mean, if you look at Walmart or billboards that just surround us everywhere, I mean, this is just a different level of existing. And like this, I'd like to do a video just showing the different figures that are like they're holding up the building, like they're part of the building, like there's a message here in these structures, that these structures represent the people, that it is them in a way, like there's messages and wisdom to be gained through these structures. And I think that's why they're constantly destroying them. They remove these gorgeous details like this. They basically try to dumb them down and make them more inconspicuous, so we're not curious as to why we're supposed to be the best and the most advanced, yet we're not making anything like this. And they're so massive. That's why the idea of like the mountains are melted buildings concept, it's so hard for us to grasp, because we can't fathom making structures that are that big, that are as big as mountains. But like looking at this right here, I zoomed it in for y'all. Those are people. These tiny little specks up here are people. Look at all this red brick just for this dome. I mean, one of these things by themselves, this gap here, this opening is probably, what, I don't know, 30, 40 feet, maybe 50 feet high. And that's just this little bit here whenever you look at it, you know, in the grand scheme of you're looking at the whole structure. Like those tiny little dots are people. So these things were massive, and I think these old world buildings that are still intact, they're just pockets of survival that survived the X factor, that aren't embedded in a mountainside or partially melted or burnt to a crisp and black and all the details have melted off, which I think is a lot of the other stuff we see. It's lost the facade and the outside, so you just see the bare bones, and the inside of these structures. And I know probably everyone that's watching my video is aware of this kind of research, but it's just worth pointing out again and again, because there's so many examples I could never see them all or show them all or collect them all. So I'm just doing my part to kind of get this idea and this vision out here. So yeah, the inside is just as impressive, if not more, than the outside. Just gorgeous. So this one I believe is damaged. That's why it's kind of blackened and discolored. And again, if we were to zoom in on this, there's just details to the max on every single inch of this place. It's just beautiful. This one too, I think this is heat damage is why we have this discolorization, because you can see these are pretty white. And a lot of the times they'll say that the blackening and the discolorization is from like the Industrial Revolution and the smoke and all that kind of stuff, but it's not consistent with that narrative. Like this one, like why would people with horse and buggy build this whenever no one's living in it? There's really no function that we know of. It's just a big, tall, beautiful arch with some elaborate towers and steeples coming up, spires coming up. There's no real function to it as far as we know, but I think there was. I think it was, you know, part of the power grid, but look how beautiful. But see how it's blackened? I think that's damaged too. And like this one, I think this is clearly damaged, and you can actually see little slits. I think those are windows that got closed up from heat expansion. And even this ground, you know, this rubbly sections jutting out, there's actually some melt going on back here where we get that kind of a boulder look that looks like it's, you know, flowing out of the walls. Yeah, I think this is also damaged. This probably had beautiful decorations and motifs and sculpture and all kinds of stuff on it, but it's gone now. And this one, it's just like it's rotting away. And I just included this one because you can find these little ruins all over the place. Which this is probably the tippy top of the rest of the building is gone now. It's probably something below there. But yeah, so we only have this left, and this doesn't look like war or entropy. You know, none of the excuses they would give us. It looks like it's heat damage. Looks like it's totally blitzed up. Like the bricks themselves are misshapen and discolored. Same here. This is just another one. And again, these are, you can find these, just can search for ruins in whatever country, you know, old abandoned churches, stuff like that. And you'll find this kind of damage like this where it's not just from time and neglect. It's like it's from the X factor. And again, these things were really, really huge. A lot of them are really huge. I think this mound back here now could be structure that just crumbled in on itself. I mean, another thing too with the mountains, I think the idea of the Tower of Babel, there were probably multiple Towers of Babel. Like, I think that a lot of the stories that get passed down like that, or even Noah's Ark, it's something familiar, like blood memory to us. And so these stories are kept to pass down, but it's really made quite more insignificant than I think it probably was. There were probably a lot of Towers of Babel. There's probably pockets of Noah's Ark, potentially, you know. But they just keep the story and keep it into a very condensed version, so it just becomes this kind of mythological tale. Another one just to show the damage, and see how these windows are not symmetrical anymore. They wouldn't have built that way like these got, like this one specifically, and this one too, but it's more narrow at the bottom from heat expansion, in my opinion. Like this was probably decorated to the max, just gorgeous, you know, but it's just deteriorated from the X factor. This too, all these jutting out rocks and stuff, they just, the way the bricks responded to this event is just mind-blowing. You can almost, if you envision it happening, you can almost hear the growling type of sound that it would have made, you know, to get this kind of effect. And look at the texture here, how beautiful. But yeah, you can see that the texture difference from this wall to here. There's no way they built that way. Another one, you can see the same thing, all this variety of texture, variety of brick behavior. This one's really a good example. You can see here it's like stone, almost like concrete or something. And then here it's become like slate. like bluish black, kind of shiny slate. And then you still have brick here, you still have some brick here, and then this is just like porousy rock, like coral reef almost. It's like a different texture from this rock. And here it's a little bit more intact. You can see some red bricks back here too. And this one, these kind of examples are my favorite type of examples of this destruction. You can see it just looks, to me, it reminds me of like if you melt plastic, how it like bubbles over and gets this very ununiformed kind of lumpy texture. That's what this looks like. It's like this just got so hot it just started curling back on itself and melting down. And it's over here too. So this all would have been like there's pockets throughout this area, you know, that go all the way across to here. Like this, of course they'll say this is old, and it's really cool because a lot of the epiphanies or conclusions that I had doing this research, I've discovered other people have also had, like, oh, they're just saying it's older because it's more damaged and that's how they excuse it away, and oh, they're just saying it's this genre and that genre and this culture made it this way and da-da-da, but actually they were all part of the same civilization. That's my opinion. I mean, I think the temples, the pyramids, all of these old structures that we can't figure out how they made them or what they're for, they were just part of the same power grid, realm-wide civilization, and that whole civilization got wiped out from this extreme Armageddon cataclysm. And so with this one, it looks like this looks melted to me, which they'll say it's old, so they'll blame this away on erosion, or they'll say it was carved, like they probably say these parts are carved. They might say it's from erosion because it's so very old, you know. But you can see areas in here that are more pristine, that aren't eroded away, and I just think if there's just such a concise pattern that we see with this damage, I don't think it's just old and eroded. And a lot of these sites too, if you just go to one site and start researching it, you'll eventually find little pockets of red brick. Like this bridge here is like literally melting down onto itself, and I've got several other pictures of this bridge, but I just included this one for this slideshow. This is in Scotland, but and there's actually a big castle up on the hill above here that you know, they say this was built in addition to the castle, and it was like for torture and dungeon and all this stuff, which they always say that. I think they try to paint this whole world, this old world, as like almost demonic and evil, the Dark Ages, you know, that kind of idea. So it's like, ooh, it's creepy, and they throw them in dungeons and do these horrible, torturous things to them and all this stuff. Whenever we know in our timeline with like the asylums and the lobotomies, like that shit goes on in this reality, and we're not building these badass structures all over the place, you know. Like these are probably pretty nice guys for the most part, because you can't build those kind of beautiful, pristine, divine looking structures if everyone is torturing everyone in their dungeon underground. You know, that's ridiculous. You don't have time for all the details. But anyway, this little area here has some pretty interesting stories that are probably a lot of mumbo jumbo, you know, about ghost and torture and that kind of thing, but probably happened after the X-Fire, the torture and stuff, if it did happen. So here too, you can see just another variety of basically a variety of heat differentials, where the way that the energy moved through the structure, it affected some areas of the structure more intensely than others. You have brick here that looks pretty nice, and the edge is still nice and sharp here, and this is starting to look like boulders and blow out and group together, and then this is just totally melted together where you can't see the bricks anymore. And this one, they kind of start, you know, you start seeing a pattern. So this was, you know, part of the structure, this was all part of the structure, and it's just completely deformed now, and just completely mutilated by the heat damage that ran, the frequency or whatever it was that caused this, that just ran through the entire structure. It caused a variety of damage, so it's just a big tangled mess now. And this, they'll, you know, say is very, very, very old, and you can see some like Chinese style old world structure here that's like tucked in, like it was just stuck in there like a clay wall they just stuck buildings into. But you can see how it looks all soft and melted, but they'll say this is carved, but you can actually see little brick lines and stuff in here. Same thing. It's crazy looking. You can see where like the brick lines would be, and back here there's brick. You can actually see brick back here. And you can see, always kind of spot little pockets. If it's not all the way, you know, kind of the reddish orange, like the red brick color, you'll see little pockets of it where it just like, you know, got squeezed out of the brick. You can see it here real good, and this still has some of that brick tone to it, but it's just cooked to stone. You know, if these details had gone melted a little bit more, they would just say it was all stone, which they would say this is really, really old and they carved it in and all this kind of nonsense. This is another angle. Look at those steps. It's almost like you see footsteps, like they were trying to run up before it totally melted. Or it just the way it carried through here, it just, you know, spilled down, and as it got to here, the weight of it kept adding to the next step and the next step until it pushed down that center area. And these are always crazy looking, these pockets of survival that are like embedded into a cliff wall. And this one, you can tell that that's like becoming rock. Because sometimes you'll see them and it'll still look pretty and still have a color that's kind of separate looking, a surface texture that's separate, which this still has brick texture. But you can see that this is becoming this, you know. This one too, this is another good example. You can see that this is becoming rock like this. So all of this would have been structure, and I think that some of these little areas, these little pockets that aren't closed in were probably windows, maybe apertures. There's probably an archway here, but it, you know, this part here came down and closed up that section, and there's some down here and back there, like wall, more of this, more visible wall. Another one here. And you can see there's like an aperture here with an archway. And this little opening here, that could have either been and you can actually see part of the wall here, but I think probably this whole section right here was probably maybe a tower or something, but it squished down in on itself, so you get this kind of pie shape as it spilled in, and these, you know, the ones on the side closed in, and so it didn't have anywhere to go, so it just filled in at the top, so you get that kind of pie shape. This one I had in my very first presentation, which it was just zoomed in, so I was showing this and here, so you could see straight from there to there. And you can see this is like a little pocket of survival. But as you progress and look into this research, you can see with like this, you can start making out spires and, you know, all the different elements that we see, all the different forms that we see in the Greco-Roman structures. And back here too, you can see where there'd be like a tower sticking up. Back here too, you can start seeing the silhouette of the Greco-Roman building. So if those are all building structure, and this is probably building too, these things I think were really, really high in the air. If they were extracting energy from the ether and stuff, the higher up they would have went, the more energy they could have pulled. And I think that's why the bigger the structure was, the harder it fell. So that's why tons of mountains are just mush. We don't have like big pockets of survival that's like half the upper part of the mountain, because it's extracting so much energy. Like the harder it fell, I mean, it just got completely melted. So like back here, I think these were probably structure, and if you imagine them going up, they were probably really, really high up, but they just spilt down into themselves and made a big puddly mess that looks like a mountain now. This one too, you can see all these little pockets. There's an archway, and they'll say this is carved. But I disagree, obviously. You can see where it's spilling down here. That would have been the different sections of the structure. And here, there's actually bricks still left here. Why would anybody carve into these cliff walls like this whenever it's just on a, you know, a flat wall that's, you know, 200, 500, 700 feet from the ground, and it's just flat all the way up where you can't easily access it. And from the inside, they won't have like tunnels that go all the way down. It'll, you know, maybe go back, you know, 15 feet from this point, and then it's just rock because it closed in. Like nobody would build that. No primitive people would carve that. That's ridiculous. And this one, you can still see all the like paintings, they look like Byzantine, you know, like the Christ figure, the angelic figures with the golden halo. That's what these look like. But unfortunately, either somebody intentionally, anyway, all the faces are scratched off, so you can't see any of the faces whenever you zoom in. They're all scratched off. So either some little punks did it to be funny and just mess up the faces, or some people were sent in specifically by the government or something like that to scratch off the faces, or maybe there was some kind of element within the paint on the faces that whenever this building got fried, it zapped the the pigment. Maybe there was some kind of metallic pigment or something in the face. I don't know, but all the faces are gone. But yeah, you can see it over here too. These archways just melted like ice cream. This one just looks sad to me. It looks like a sad face. I don't know why I see that, just like, oh, I got this very sad expression about it. But you see it's got brick here, and you can see brick lines in the what we now call rock in here too. There's some apertures and some apertures here, but yeah, it just looks really sad. And this one, you can see it running down, like dripping down. And these big blocks were probably part of the structure too. They just, either they used some kind of concrete, their type of concrete, and that's what this is, or this was like bricks that expanded out and combined. But I bet it was probably their concrete. But yeah, the dripping is why I wanted to include this one. Like all these little pockets, like maybe they could excuse away and say that people carved these down here, which I would still not believe, especially whenever there's columns carved on. But up here, why in the world would they go all the way up here and carve? How would you even get up there? My gosh. Over here, and you see these straight lines. I think this was probably the edge to one part of the structure right here, and this was another one coming up, but as it came down, you can see it poured over the top of it up here. It melted down and just had to go somewhere. Over here too, but you can see this line here as well. And this one, you see this little pocket here, and this, I forget what this is in Scotland. I can't remember the name of this castle, but there's a name for this little section of castle, and there's a little bit over here, like a couple of walls. But down here, you know, this is supposed to just be sedimentary layers, but you can see where there's little apertures, and you see the shape, you know, where there would have been different sections here too, and it just spilled out into the water in here as well. But yeah, look at those brick lines. And down here, another one here, you can see where it actually pancaked onto itself, and so part of it kind of squished out long ways. This one, I have a close-up picture, but back here there's all these little pockets, and there's one here too, but let's zoom in. Yeah, you can see it all there. You can almost make out where there would have been like towers that melted into the, you know, the big, maybe a dome or something behind here, but it just kind of fell back, melted and flattened and fell back here. And you can still see part of the face of the structure, but it's completely deformed now. Yeah. This is in China, I believe, but we've got all these weird anomalies like this that they'll say, oh, we found one of the largest cave on the planet, we found this other, and there'll be, you know, massive archways and big openings that go way up into the sky and columns and shit, and it just looks like melted structure to me. Like the more you do this evidence, it's just like this idea of geology requiring millions of years, sedimentary layers that are floating in from, you know, lands far off, you know, millions of miles away over millions of years, and just compacting and compressing until they make all of these layers, and then erosion. So you have to have sediment that's softer, that's going to slowly erode away, so you get these kind of anomalies. Or they'll say like this little stream, I bet they probably say this little stream used to be like a raging river, and it came through and it busted out this area over time. That's probably what they say. But truth be known, this stream here is probably part of the plumbing left over from this structure that got destroyed during the X Factor. And of course volcanoes, we can't forget volcanoes. That's their like favorite whenever nothing else fits, whenever you can't get erosion, sedimentary layers, and tectonic plates to cover the geology that we're looking at. They'll just say, oh, there was a volcano here, it's gone now. It was here, 400 million years ago, it's gone now, but that's where this all came from this volcano that's now gone. But yeah, you see the archway up here, and down here too, there's some archways. And this, you can see like brick lines all the way up. I can hear too this little melted tower thingy and brick lines. More archways. There's 3, 1, 2, 3 that we can see. Look at that. And this water just coming from nowhere. And there's water dripping right here too. Just pouring out from nowhere. There's an opening there. And you see brick lines. All these brick lines. The sedimentary layers excuse is really genius on their part. Because yeah, we cannot prove it's just like, oh, that star is made of this gas and whatever, and it's, light years away, whatever. Like, there's no way we can test that and confirm that. The same with sedimentary layers. Like, maybe erosion, we can do tests and be like, yeah, erosion happens, and that's how they get away with it. They mix some truth with lies, and especially whenever you're a child, you just look to the authorities for your information, for your knowledge, and then that's how you see it. And it's, once that's questioned as an adult, it becomes this personal attack because you're so connected to it. Like, I collected rocks growing up. I had a rock tumbler. I've always collected meteorites and fossils. I've got boxes of them. And yeah, I love geology. I think there's basically people that are naturally drawn to this kind of topic. You either go one way or the other. You become a zealot and just this fanatic about what the Rockefeller education system tells you about it, or you have a true desire to understand why you're drawn to it, why it's so fascinating, why it's so monumental. And so you continue to research until you find what resonates as true. And for me, this meltology is what resonates as true, because I can walk around where I live and this can be confirmed, or I can just research online like I've been doing, and yeah, that's what resonates. Their geology has some truth to it. I'm not saying it's all just fairy tale, but they have the confidence that they should not have, because they shouldn't have this all-knowing whenever it requires millions of years that can't be proven. That too, look at it. You can see the layers here, the different layers. Those are probably floors that smashed in, and depending on the decoration, the type of brick and all that kind of stuff, and the heat that was moving through it during the X Factor, it caused these levels to become different colors. And like this would have been like a bridge connecting this structure and this structure, and back here you can actually see there's like what looks like an archway here that's closed in now, up here as well, and of course the layers. And we got possibly another bridge here. You've got some closed in apertures, I think were probably archways, and all these layers back here. So maybe this research might seem like a stretch, but if you look into it, it starts making a lot more sense than what we were taught about geology and geological formations. But you just have to look, you just have to look, because then you find all these pockets where you'll have actual structure that is fused in, melted in, part of these so-called mountains, and that doesn't make sense. I mean, if there were just one or two, but it's literally overwhelming. There is an abundance of this evidence, and it just smacks you in the face once you start looking, and it's undeniable at that point. So that makes me pretty confident to say this was a structure, and it's just melted down, and it's completely damaged and in ruins. And the geological excuse that we're given, the mainstream narrative of geology is not accurate. And there's just another really cool one. This one's in France, but it looks like it folded down over on itself, and the opening was there, and all this moss and stuff. And then you have the water still, which I think is the busted plumbing from the X Factor. Because if you had all these structures and all this complex plumbing, and they had these amazing fountains that we still have a bunch of those left, and some cataclysm happened, and it melted down the structures. They just started collapsing in on themselves in an instant. This would have been instantaneous, and the type of rock shows us that too. You know, like tons of the rock that we have, you can tell that it cooled like rapidly, like in an instant. So anyway, if that would have happened, and these buildings had this complex system of plumbing running through them, and that cataclysm happened, some of the plumbing would be cut off because it would have collapsed in on itself, or it would be flowing freely now and still flowing from wherever they pulled the water from, which I think was just somewhere under the surface, like primary water, that if you dig deep enough, you'll eventually hit water. So yeah, so I think that's where the water came from. But anyway, that's it. This is kind of a long ramble. I just want to make a video and share some of the stuff I've been looking into and get it out there. So everybody have a good day. Bye.